talking about Australia in the second part of his autobiography, which is called You've Had Your Time, being the second part of the Confessions of Anthony Burgess. Burgess writes that in Australia, his second wife, Liana,
could have spoken nothing but Italian, starting with a fisherman at Fremantle and ending in the restaurants of King's Cross.
This is King's Cross here. It's a quarter devoted to restaurants, strip clubs, brothels and so on. A very pleasant place to stroll around. And Burgess continues,
Europe had entered the continent and begun to plane its tough wood.
But he has certain reservations about Australia. One of the problems with the country, he felt, was that, as he put it, there was
far too much philistinism.
Moreover, he writes,
the chip on the Aussie's shoulder was there, and I wondered why. It was hard for this Pom to say the right thing, and opening the literary festival, I angered by trying to please. I quoted Drayton's verses to the Virginia pioneers, and in regions far such heroes bring ye forth as those from whom we came, and plant our name under that star not known unto our north. This, for some reason, sounded condescending, and my commendation of Patrick White's achievement aroused snarls about the meeting White later. I could see what the lesser Australian writers meant. He gave Liana and myself dinner exquisitely cooked by his Greek companion, and this was the first occasion in my life when the ladies had to withdraw. The men were left to circulate the port. White spoke highly patrician English and made no secret of his homosexuality. He was not Aussie enough for the Aussies, yet Voss was the supreme Australian novel. As for homosexuality, the digger prejudice was so strong that one had to suspect an occult vein of it in the most ostentatiously virile. An Australian woman confirmed the outsider's view in a little book called Now You'll Think I'm Awful, which merely presented, with inevitable Antipodean facetiousness, the facts of the matter. There was a low-middle-class shame about sex. Roth's Portnoy's complaint which I'd read the previous summer in San Francisco, was forbidden entrance into Australia, though copies could be bought in New Zealand. Censorship was of necessity the theme of the public lecture I had to give in Australia. The Australian Broadcasting Commission recorded the talk, and they were to transmit it on a Sunday evening. But the Commission took fright at the last minute. I summed up in this lecture the censorship situation in such of the countries of the world as I had visited. Anti-intellectualism and sexual prudery both seem to be British colonial legacies. The moral and mental climate of Australia did not do justice to the land itself, vast with bewilderingly rich flora and fauna. The politicians could have been respected if they'd made their philistinism an aspect of a policy, as in the fascist state that D.H. Lawrence had falsely foreseen in Kangaroo. But it was an aspect of power without enlightenment. Anti-intellectualism was to be met even among the writers. One said, Frank Hardy, a very considerable novelist, trembled with resentment of Patrick White, who had let Australia down by viewing it through the prism of a pommy education. He spoke in a debate which I chaired, but the chairman, being a bloody pommy intruder, could be ignored, nor could I, as a guest, enforce with safety the rules of debate. Even in an amicable drinking session, the chip on the shoulder would be presented for knocking off, said a literary girl. You understand his Russian? It was best not to argue. It was best not to take Australia as other than a country pleasingly antinomian, crammed with sensuous delights, fine oysters, thick steaks, excellent white wine, blessed with wonderful light and piquant birds and animals. Lawrence, leaving the country after writing what is still the greatest novel about it, shrewdly lamented that the land had been used but not loved. Perhaps it was easier for a mere visitor to adore kangaroos and budgerigars than a farmer who could only curse their destructiveness. There was a brutality of muscle as well as thought. But it was an innocent brutality. I had no sense anywhere of genuine malevolence. Australia rather seemed a country that was doggedly determined to honour no bloody nonsense, rather infantile masculinity, refusing to grow beyond the pioneer virtues, despite the progressiveness of its universities, the work of its artists, who had to go to Europe for recognition, and a true democratic spirit, against which its democratically elected politicians were disposed to fight. Australians saw themselves as despised by the motherland, and London-based Australian entertainers were dedicated to disparaging Australia as a mere comic turn and exploited by America, a sister country with no chip on its shoulder. Australia was vulgar. I am a lowbrow and I write for lowbrows. In the airport bar, a schooner downer asked me the riddle, dunno. My wife happens to be a dago. One couldn't take offence.